Now I will invite our incoming chair, Chip Childs, to the stage to join me for the traditional fireside chat. So please join me in welcoming Chip. Well, hello again.
Hello.
You've been RAA chair before, but we're glad that you're back. As RAA chair, an airline CEO, you were chair of the NAC. You've done a lot. You've seen a lot of changes in regional aviation. So what's your view of the core issues that we're facing right now?
Well, I think it's probably not surprising to anybody, particularly in this room. I think first and foremost, we still have a major pilot shortage that is having a huge impact on us as a company and the entire industry and small communities. And I love what Martin presented relative to some of the dynamics of what's happening with travel trends in the regional space. Just to give some statistics, I get nervous about giving some stats, but back in 2019, at SkyWest, we had about 5,500 pilots. Today, we have about 4,300 pilots today. And to the extent that we are literally 1,200 pilots short from where we were back in 2019, there's a lot of special interests that say there's not a shortage. There's a lot of narrative in this town about if that's really a factual thing or not, but it is absolutely true. And then when you take what Martin said relative to what's happened in the pandemic, where there's this deurbanization of the United States, where more people are moving out of big cities into smaller and mid-sized cities, we fundamentally think that we probably need another 1,000 pilots than we needed in 2019 to really meet the demand of what we're seeing, through small communities and through what our partners are asking for. So that gap is real. That gap is a challenge, and I think we're to the point now where it's going to take us a very long time to get back to meeting the demand of what's out there in the regional space. I think when you take a look at that gap and those opportunities in the regional space, I think we're also a little bit nervous about supply chain and some of the supply side scenarios with manufacturers and service providers, and we've had some of those conversations with these folks today. Certainly, we're anticipating at SkyWest. We're trying to work through the pilot shortage. We're trying to make some headway relative to that, but we're also worried about what happens when we get through that down the road, however long that may take, to make sure that we've got the right equipment to be able to utilize what we need to meet the demand.
And the maintenance technicians as well.
Maintenance technicians as well.
We're going to need a lot.
I think in the regional, sometimes we're sitting here also, it's such a pilot-centric problem that we forget about some of the other problems that are down the road. And I think we need to be cognizant of those as well, like technicians.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to need a lot of heavy maintenance to bring those aircraft back online when and if we solve the pilot shortage. So, and another thing you said in your remarks really speaks to me about the de-urbanization of the nation. And at the same time, communities are losing air service. And so we're really we're urbanizing our GDP of this country, and that's a bad mix.
Yeah.
So what's your view of some of the steps that airlines are already taking? Because we're asking for government partnership, but what are some steps that airlines like SkyWest are doing to recruit and support more pilots?
Well, I think you also have to go back, again, I keep not wanting to go back to 2019, but for some of us, I think we were fortunate that we had some very good programs in place before the pandemic, because the weird part about it is we were worried about this in 2019 going into 2020. We saw some attrition numbers. There was heavy demand the first month or so of 2020. And we'd established a very strong pipeline with about 200 schools where we were utilizing pretty sophisticated databases, tracking progress of cadets and students, where we were fortunate before the pandemic to do that. And there was a moment in 2020 where we're like, why did we invest in all of that? This pilot shortage is over, because capacity is down 50% in the middle of 2020. And then through the CARES Act, and all the early retirements that happened with mainline carriers, and we snapped right back into even a worse situation that we've been feeling today. So we were fortunate to have a fair amount of good, strong systems and programs in place where we were tracking individuals throughout about 200 schools so we could see where they were. The interesting part about it is, however, though, is that we've come up with, not so much that we were tracking a lot of the pilots that were making progress through schools, but we became extraordinarily short on captains because they were the first ones that left. So I think as we talk about a pilot-constrained industry, even still today, it is a significantly captain-constrained industry. So from our perspective, we're just trying to do things. I mean, it takes captains to create captains. And from our perspective, we're trying to be as creative as we can, to make sure that we're making sure we're identifying the right people that potentially could come to SkyWest, and making sure that we're developing the ones that are going to continue to develop others at SkyWest. The recruiting side, relative to first officers, we're relatively optimistic. I don't think that we're still doing enough from a diversity perspective in this industry. I think there's a lot more things that we can do to change the dynamics of that. It's still a very, very, very centric world the way it's been for almost the last 20 years. We're improving relative to pilots and the ones that we're attracting, but I think that we need to do a lot more. And a lot of that has to do with maybe having the folks here in DC help with financial aid assistance relative to getting people access to this amazing, amazing industry that we participate in today. I mean, it's a great career, and it's always been a great career, but it is a really great career now. A lot of people are happy with where pilot pay is. A lot of people want to get into it, but there's just so many financial barriers still to get into the industry. It's too much.
Yeah, it's such a bitter irony, isn't it, that we have made this career so attractive, and yet a large swath of the population just doesn't have the financial access to get to those transformative careers.
And it's one of the careers, and this is the thing that I kind of roll my eyes at. This is a career where if people would invest and help out this section of our economy, the return on investment for student loan programs or anything like that, it's hard to find a better career where that stuff couldn't be a better ROI, no matter who's issuing the financial incentive. So,
100%. So talking about what our government stakeholders can do, there's an FAA bill. If you hadn't heard, there's an FAA bill moving or not moving.
It is moving?
Or not moving, as it were.
Yeah.
But there's been a lot of discussion about the Essential Air Service Program. And what that was designed to do is really be a safety net for communities so they didn't lose their air service started during deregulation. And so some have looked at that as maybe the panacea or a solution to the pilot shortage or a solution to the woes that small community air service is experienced now related to that. So can you talk a little bit about whether is EAS the answer? Can it be part of the answer? Is it enough?
I would say the EAS is a small part of the answer, but I think EAS program is as good and strong as it is. There's a lot, back to Martin's data points, there's a lot of small communities that need assistance with this service. We're seeing a lot of things as we've dabbled in certain portions of what we do with Essential Air Service in small communities. It's not just Essential Air Service. I mean, that's a small sliver. I think it's a very layered approach that the government needs to take a look at a multitude of solutions to fix the pilot shortage. But admittingly, we see that the language in some of the drafts of the FAA authorization bill, I think there's some good stuff in there, but to think that that's going to solve this, there's no way it's going to solve it by itself.
Right. Well, and one fundamental of it is that I think it was in 2013, there was kind of a you're in the lifeboat or you're not. So if a community wasn't already getting air service at that time, they're not ever able to be eligible without a change to the law. So it isn't even available to all communities.
No, and look, we spent a lot of time with communities. I mean, SkyWest was founded, 51 years ago based upon small community service. And from the perspective that we have some things about dynamics of different communities, some that are in Essential Air Service, some that are not in Essential Air Service, these communities are very desperate. If you look at the multiplier effect of air service in the economy of a small community, it's astonishing what it does for that community, for not just economic growth, but to provide supplies and things that the communities are really starving for. So from our perspective, the small community thing is beyond EAS, and I think it's something that the government needs to take a lot better look at to for the economy of the United States to make it in a way that's going to help so many people in so many ways.
Yeah, I agree. It remains a really important program, but it's just one, and we need a lot.
Yeah.
We needed to be part of an intricate network of supports. I'm going to switch gears to another topic, the most important topic, which is safety. And the safety records of Part 121 and Part 135 have made continuous, relentless improvement over the last 2 decades. And in your view, why is that? What's made the biggest difference?
Oh boy. I would say it probably boils down to about three things. One is data, two is technology, and three is the sharing of both of those, technology and the data. In my view, and I spend as CEO a significant amount of time with our safety department, our flight ops department, and we have so much sophisticated data now that we have relative to SMS programs, AQP programs, FOQA, ASAP, all the things that SMS has afforded to us. We spend so much time evaluating in a predictive model what's happening with pilots, what's happening with flight attendants, what's happening with the aircraft, what's happening with cities that we're flying into. We fly into Aspen and we monitor the data. We're the only carrier flying in and out of Aspen. We monitor the data about that so much and make sure that we're doing it in a way that's safe and effective and with good operational performance. So from my perspective, there's a lot of narratives out there about what's created the safety so much in the last 2 years. I think it's absolutely unequivocally the amount of data and technology and how we evaluate that data and how we share it. If we have some issues where we have various approaches into a certain city, we feel comfortable sharing that with the FAA, ATC, to find the solutions that we need to make sure that it's done in a very, very safe manner. There's a lot of fail-safe things that have gone through that have been helpful. Certainly rest rules, we embrace the 117 rules as well. From the perspective, the word that's very difficult to have a conversation with sometimes in these words of 1,500 hours, I don't know that has had anywhere near the impact that others, special interest groups would say had the impact. If you really look at the true impact on safety, it's going to come from the data that we evaluate, the technology employed, and how we can share that data with speed and effectiveness.
Yeah, and I think that's a message that needs to be amplified again and again, just the importance of those data sharing programs and how effective they've been, because if we look at the environment and how much it's changing, how much the technology is changing, all of those things, the experts have to lean into those SMS programs at every level, getting input from all the employees and making those meaningful changes as our environment continues to shift, so we can always stay ahead of emerging risks.
Yeah, I think particularly, as we train pilots, through a pilot shortage, our biggest concern is with so much pilot turnover over the past 18 months. We're training significantly a large number of pilots, but we have a lot of great comfort in how we can evaluate them, how we pair them, the dynamics and the variables that we can help them avoid getting into, and the things that we can control. I think that given the fact that we've seen in the regional space so much pilot turnover and training so many pilots over the last 18 months, these programs is what really under that kind of pressure has helped keep the system extraordinarily safe.
Absolutely. Okay, next I'm going to ask you to take your RAA hat off for a moment and put on your SkyWest Inc. hat in consideration of your investment in SkyWest Charter. And it's no secret that the FAA has been lobbied pretty hard by some of the pilot unions to change the rules when it comes to charter airlines. You've got an application out there that's been pending in the balance, so you've got a unique vantage point here. So, since we have the safest system in the world, since we're constantly evaluating and moving that safety ahead, are wholesale changes needed in that area?
Well, maybe we did this to ourselves, I don't know. But I think as we applied for the application with SkyWest Charter for commuter authority, it's been over 16 months now. We internalized what we thought we would want to operate an airline with over and above whatever the regulations, said that you should do it. So we believe in our data, we believe in our safety systems, and most importantly, we believe in our reputation. Some people think that we skirt safety for, profitability, which is absolutely, completely false, because from our perspective, safety is the best investment that we can make. We're a public company, we have a wide range of stakeholders, and safety is the center point of everything we do, no matter if it's SkyWest Airlines or SkyWest Charter. When we started out with SkyWest Charter, we looked at what, obviously what the 135 rules were. From our perspective, we didn't like that was something that we would necessarily get into from a risk perspective. And so we decided as we did the application to deploy all of the other things that we talked about in your last question, SMS, FOQA, 117 rest rules. And as when we went down that pathway, we felt very comfortable with some of the dynamics that we could utilize to make sure that we serve the cities, appropriately. So when we came in with all those rules, we're a little bit confused because from our perspective, we thought that we were doing the FAA, the DOT, a big favor in bringing this level of safety, to the industry. But to the extent that they've now come back and said, well, we want to open the whole thing up and take a look at it, we feel like we're confused by that, to be honest with you. Because if we had an authorization today, we could be providing all of these safety elements to the industry today. So it comes across a little bit from us as anti-competitive, anti-safety, and definitely anti-small community relative to what our objective is. So if we say, back to the question, if I think that wholesale changes are needed, I don't know what the industry necessarily thinks the wholesale changes are needed. I think that we have enough confidence in what we're trying to do in that space that we feel like that's what we would do. And I have a feeling by the time they're done evaluating all this type of stuff, they're probably going to come back with rules that probably aren't as strong as what we're flying today, which is sort of the sad part because we could be deploying this level of service and safety today compared to what's out there.
That's a really good point, and you've got a lot of support from small communities in your efforts there. I'm going to switch gears again. You mentioned you're a publicly traded company, but your relationship with your mainline carriers continues to evolve. It's a topic you've talked about on some of your earnings calls. How are your relationships today, and how do you see them changing in 5 years?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think our relationships today are very, very good. In fact, in some cases, with most of them, probably better than it's ever been. I think that we have found through a lot of things, and I started off my career, my number one responsibility was to manage relationship with the partners. And I think from our perspective, we've learned a lot of lessons about these relationships. I think through the pandemic that had to evolve a little bit in these relationships, but I think there's some timeless principles about managing our relationship with these partners that never go away. First and foremost, don't ever promise something that you can't deliver on. I think that some of the worst things that's happened to a lot of regional carriers over the last several years is that they've overpromised and underdelivered. And I think that hopefully we take a very conservative view where we basically are trying to not just underpromise, but try to be specific about what we can do, and then put all of our passions together to make sure that we do it the right way. We hear a lot of things relative to our partners, relative to SkyWest. First and foremost, we spend a lot of time sharing data about safety. I mean, if they don't feel comfortable that we're doing everything and at least what they're doing relative to their safety programs, that's the baseline, I think, for all of us as regional carriers, that some people think, oh, you're a regional carrier, you're not doing as much as you were doing, with the major carriers. Truth of the matter is SkyWest, has one of the best, this is selfish now, we think SkyWest has one of the best training programs in the entire world. That's why our pilots are so sought after from all the partners. And from that perspective, I think that kind of credibility goes a long way. I think being able to deliver a strong operating performance and work with them when you have IROPS and that type of stuff is essential as well. And I think those things are timeless. I mean, to the other side of the question, people are always saying, okay, well, you're a big independent carrier. Is that a sustainable business model? And from our perspective, we think it could be, one of the only ways to sustain it. Being public, I think, affords us some ability to bring a tremendous amount of capital to some of our contracts and do some things that they may need us to do. I mean, our partners have a lot of debt. There's some solutions that we can help them with there, but at the same time, they like that we have to have this level of transparency being a public company, and we got a lot of stakeholders, but they also know that our partnership with them is critically important to make sure that our business is ongoing and is going to be successful. So I don't think it's going to change a lot in the next 5 years if we do these fundamental things the right way, because I don't know that those fundamental things are going to change in 5 years.
Yeah. So put another way, sometimes we hear that when regionals and the pilot shortage have such an impact on small communities, that might be mitigated somehow by the main lines going back there and going back to pre-deregulation where they serve their own regional feed on mainline metal. Do you see that happening?
I don't see that happening for a couple of reasons. One is, what Martin talked about. I mean, the economics of us still being able to fly that level of aircraft with those trip costs are still going to be there. I wouldn't hesitate to also say that I think that there is, as international markets continue to grow, that's typically where they're focused. And we have everybody in the RAA has some very good expertise relative to small communities, and we can carry that responsible brand, whether it's Delta, American, United, or Alaska, into some of these small communities. I think that we represent it well, and if they trust us to do that, I think we're going to continue with the existing model.
You've had a lot of interactions with the FAA in Washington lately, and we'll have some lawmakers here, and lawmakers have been paying attention to our sector and to what we do. What do you need from Washington to run your business in a healthy manner?
Oh, boy.
I've got all those questions.
How much time we got? I think those questions will be explored over the next couple of days, but I'd give you two or three right away. I think one thing is we definitely need a new FAA administrator. I think it's been too long without one. I think we need to make sure we've got very good, strong leadership at the top of the FAA. We have a current candidate, obviously, that is being considered, and I think that at least me personally would heavily endorse him. From what I know about him and have worked with him, he'd be a phenomenal FAA administrator. I think secondarily, I think the thing we need out of Washington, D.C. is to listen more to us at the RAA and less of other specific special interest groups. I think the critical problems that are facing aviation is a pilot shortage and the lack of small community air service, and I think that they're seeking advice from other people besides us who know more about those two things than anybody else. And I think that we need to have a bigger, louder voice and one in which they listen to us and pay more attention to. I think clearly DC is a little bit polarized, not polarized, but paralyzed as well. Oh, is that better? Is that good?
It's not on yet.
Is that okay? I'll just yell.
I'll just
yell. I think from our perspective, I think that back to the DC thing, I think that we just need to be listened to more. I mean, we're the one with the data, we're the one with the ideas, and we're the one with the solutions. And I think these problems are going to continue to get a little bit worse until we get, more of a voice and more consideration about what we're trying to do. We're investing specifically us, tens of millions of dollars to solutions to make the Department of Transportation and the FAA, be more effective at what they're doing. And so we'd like to have more of a conversation with them about that.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you about your views on the nominee, Mike Whitaker, but you've worked with him and you have had a good experience. We've endorsed him. We think that he's the right person to solve some of those big problems that are facing the FAA, and I couldn't agree more. When you have an acting administrator, everything becomes stasis. You don't get the kind of decisions, you don't get the kind of guidance and leadership that you need from the most important safety agency in the United States, in my view. But so you think that Mike has got the skills for the job. So what do you think he should take on first?
Well, I think given the fact that it's been a while since we've had a permanent leadership at the FAA, certainly I think that there's a couple of critical things that all of us would say. I think that, not that air traffic control is certainly doing a bad job. I think that we want to make sure that has a lot of resources to make sure that we, I think they're struggling a little bit the same as we are with staffing. And I think that's probably the top thing that they need to make sure that is addressed relative to ATC. I think that there's a lot of other issues, smaller issues that continue to need to be monitoring and maybe still fixed, which is, the 5G issues and those types of things. And then I think that we got to get to a point where, being chairman of the NAC, I think there's got to be some things that, and maybe he can fix it or not. I think that we need adequate funding to the FAA. I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize that the FAA actually does have a fair amount of funding, but it's still tied into appropriations that can get a little bit weird at times. And I think anything that we as constituents can do to help the FAA with that, I think would be very helpful. But also, I think there's a lot of technology that the FAA is a little bit behind on and could, can help get caught up to help some of us that have made some investments in our fleets. And I think that there's a little bit of those that I think we need some leadership on. But look, it's a tall task, and I wouldn't say that I'm the guy that would know exactly what he needs to do. But from our perspective, I think those are a couple of things that need some attention more sooner than later.
Yeah, I would agree. And I mean, we may see exactly how that funding stream of the FAA plays out if the government shuts down. And, we've got some real concerns about, I heard the Secretary Buttigieg said that the training of air traffic controllers could be halted. And I'm not sure if, when the shutdown happened last time, the pilot certifications halted as well. And so those are really going to be some critical what a time to come aboard.
That is. It's a rough time.
For you as well.
But it usually is, right? Yeah.
That's right.
True.
Well, Chip, we're right close to our time here, so I'm gonna let you off with that last question. But thank you so much for your leadership this year and every year, and for your friendship and for all that you do for us on Capitol Hill and just in the industry and for small communities. Thank you very much for agreeing to be chair, and thank you for this fireside chat. Please join me in thanking Chip.
Thank you. Appreciate it.